All right. Ready?
We're in the first week of the year.
We're in the first week of the year.
Here we are.
Yeah. Welcome, everyone.
First week of January.
Welcome to On This Hill.
1 down, 51 to go.
Yep. We're still rolling. We started this thing last year, and we're still moving in it.
Yeah, we're going to tweak it this year.
Yeah.
2024, we'd like to make some changes and
Yep.
Get involved with us. Starting a new sermon series on the book of Revelation. Good thing to do. First part of 2024
Yeah.
election year.
We haven't really said that from the front yet.
No, that's coming.
Yeah, but very, very soon we are starting a sermon series on Revelations.
Yeah, and that's an interesting book.
It is a very interesting book. So we've both been doing a lot of reading
Yeah.
in the last few months, I guess, getting ready for that. Outside books, of course, rereading Revelations a lot, looking at the references in the Old Testament that are being used in Revelations. That's fascinating to me, how much of the Old Testament you see in Revelations.
Yeah, over 500 references
Yeah.
in the book of Revelation. But if someone wanted to ask questions, like we'd love to put that back out there, right? If
Yeah.
you have questions for us along the way, series is going to go all the way to Easter, more or less, first quarter of the year.
Yeah.
How do you do that? How do I send in a question? It's a technical question.
We have to ask our man in the chair, who's behind the camera, actually, where do people send a question?
In the description of wherever you're watching this, there will be a form where all of the questions are anonymous.
Okay.
Nice.
There you go. In the description of wherever you are watching or listening
Whatever
to this.
medium,
So
yeah.
Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, on YouTube.
Yeah.
There should be a way to do that and do it anonymously. And so you can send in a question, and we'll do our best to get to it. We can't get to every question, but
Right.
we'll get to the best ones.
Yeah.
The ones that we can. I feel like have a good answer to.
Yeah, we look forward to hearing from you. Tells us that someone's listening. So.
Yeah. Our Christmas services. We haven't really talked about that, but we had Christmas services, and this year, because New Year's Eve and Christmas Eve were both on Sundays.
Yeah.
It was a little bit different for us. It happens every 7 years, but we had our normal Christmas Eve service is usually an evening service.
Yeah.
We have 2, 3, 4 of them, different sides of town to make that work. But this year we did them all in the morning.
Yeah,
and
felt like we had a day off, actually.
it did. It felt
we
very
didn't have
different.
to do twice in 1 week.
Yeah, to have a Christmas Eve at home with my family and not like running around like crazy here was really nice.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
And if you're planning way ahead, Christmas and 2024 is on Wednesday. So, make a note of that on your calendar.
Yeah. But those went really well. They were really great.
It's great. Great time. We love telling the story. The story's powerful. The
Yeah.
story speaks for itself. And Christmas, the idea, the message is encouraging. The Word became flesh, dwelt among us, and we saw His glory. And so we don't see everything yet, but Christmas is a tough season. I think in a lot of ways, a lot of joy and a lot of celebration and family. And then there's some bittersweet. There's loss. First Christmas without mom. First Christmas without dad. First Christmas without somebody.
Yep.
And or even loss during the season.
Yeah. It's one of the reasons why we have a life group that is specifically around grieving. So you can go to our website and find that.
Such a great group.
If you want to, please do. And that is for any kind of grief. Obviously, the loss of a loved one is one kind of grief, but there are other pains out there that need to be addressed and are best done and lived in community. And so if you've lost a relationship or job
End
or
of a season or something.
Yeah.
And I want to just put a plug in. That's such a great group. It's it's a very low bar. You don't have to read anything. You don't have to do anything. Just come and what you do is you connect with other people who share loss as well. A common struggle and you connect with one another.
Daniele De Silva, who is our life group leader,
Coordinator,
she leads our coordinates and pastors those. She's a part of that herself and does a really good job with it. So reach out to her.
Yeah, reach out to us. Reach out to her. We'll help you.
Yeah. Christmas around here is relatively, I hate to say this simple, but it is. We have kept it pretty simple. We sing the songs of worship. We sing the songs of celebration that a Savior has come. And in that, we intersperse it with the Christmas story and a very succinct message of Christmas.
Yeah.
And then we sing Silent Night together. We light a candle. It's
pretty traditional.
And that ending of seeing everyone holding a candle, it lights up the room. We're singing Silent Night. We're singing of the hope of Christmas. It gets me every time.
Yep.
That's powerful.
Yeah, light of the world.
Yeah.
Light of the world. So.
Yeah, and then New Year's Eve around here, again, was on a Sunday, and we had an evening service this time. We haven't typically done that, at least in my time here. but we had a service, I think, from 6 to 9 we did, and it was really great. We just had potluck together and worshipped and prayed in the new year. It was really awesome. It was really fun.
That's all we're trying to do, and holidays are family times, but some people don't have a lot of family, or they have family, but it doesn't work for whatever reason, but just getting people together, sharing the common joy and common vision.
Yeah, we had a good crowd too. I mean, it was people wanted to be there. It was awesome.
Yeah.
But one of the things that's coming up, so the last 2 Sundays, this Sunday and the previous Sunday, we shared messages kind of looking at the new year, because that's what the new year's good for. Yeah, there's out with the old, in with the new. Everything that could have been done in 2023 is done. There's no going back. It's on the books. But you do have another book in front of you, an unwritten chapter, 2024. How do you live this next year in light of the last year?
Yeah.
And in the last few years, there's been a lot of change, a lot of surprises, things that people weren't expecting. And so we've tried to take a couple Sundays and just talk about, how should we then live?
Yeah.
As according to the Word of God and according to the times that we live in. How does the Word of God apply to the day we're in? And what do we not know is coming in 2024?
Yeah.
So what will we need to face those years? And that kind of also sandwiched in, we're just about to start a parenting class, which I'm really excited about.
Yeah.
We haven't done a lot of parenting classes around
No, just a few over the last decade, probably.
Yeah, and they've been relatively shorter, more like weekend stuff. We're taking just a little bit more time. 5 Wednesdays with a Wednesday in between where we give a date night to couples.
Yeah, that's going to be great. Look for that on our webpage as well.
Yeah.
It's interesting what you're saying about getting ready for the year. It would be great to have some kind of a fortune teller that could describe to us what's going to happen in September or October or whatever. And we know 2024 is going to be interesting. It's an election year and everything that goes along with that. But obviously we don't have that.
No.
We don't have that those details out there, right? But what we do have is this ability, not so much to know what circumstances are going to look like, but what I am going to look like. So when XYZ happens, I want to be this kind of a person. And we do this all the time, don't we? It's like
For instance, I don't know if I dare bring this up, but we don't know who will be elected in 2024, but I know who I am or who I should be.
Yeah.
I know who's on the throne.
Yeah.
So what can I do about the knowns?
Right. Yeah.
That prepare me for the unknowns.
Yeah. And man, 2023, I mean, and 22 and 23 both, there were events that happened that were instantaneous on such and such a day.
Yeah.
Russia invaded Ukraine on such and such a day. We just saw currently going on with Israel and Gaza and things like that literally have the potential to change the way we live globally. Used to be years ago that things would happen, but they were in isolated parts of the world. You wouldn't hear about it for a couple of days until the news got out. Not today. It's instant. So whatever happens has the potential to impact us globally by the morning.
I remember distinctly the year of the pandemic. I had a group of, I want to say 80 kids, maybe more. We were about to go to Ensenada, Mexico.
Yeah.
And the night before, I gathered them for the last time to say, here's the last preparations, here's what we're going to do. And that morning they closed the border and we're not going.
Yeah.
And I had to sit down, all these kids who have raised all this money to build, I think we were going to build 4 homes that time.
Yep.
I had to say, we're not going.
Changed.
And everything changed like that. Yeah. And have to, now what? Now what happens in light of these changes? So that's this last Sunday, then we talked about wisdom and the value of wisdom, that there is value in there's lots of things we want to prepare ourselves with. The main points were we want to prepare ourselves with a moral compass. There are moral rules that you live by, and there is knowledge. That both of those things are incredibly valuable. But more valuable even than either one of those things is wisdom, and that wisdom is personified in Scripture.
Yeah.
In light of parenting, you've raised 2 boys.
Right.
How old are they now?
Oldest is 41 and 35, 36. That's terrible. I should know this right away. But 36 and 41,
Yeah. And how did it feel? Like, how do you get wisdom into a boy? I've raised girls, and all kids can be knotheads. All kids are, little and unwise. They're not. Kids aren't born wise.
Yeah.
But how does it feel with boys trying to train them in wisdom?
It's an interesting question. And of course, boys and girls are different, obviously, for a lot of reasons. But I think the question, how do you get wisdom, is the big one. And again, I don't know who it was. I think it was Confucius or some ancient philosopher that said, wisdom is acquired by study, wisdom is acquired by observation, and wisdom is acquired by experience. By study is the least painful.
Right.
Observation is usually the most perceptive, and then by experience is the most painful.
Yeah. That's absolute. Man, I wish people would slow down and listen to that. Like,
I mean,
just think about that. A book.
Yeah.
Study wisdom. $10, buy a book.
Yeah.
$15,
Here's
buy a
why
book.
it's wonderful. Here's why you should have it.
Yeah.
Here's what it looks like. Here's how you develop it.
Someone spent hard-earned life to give you wisdom, and you can just like $15, you can buy it, get it, integrate it, and you don't have to make the mistakes that they made. Observation maybe takes, in some ways, a little bit more time because it's in real time.
Right.
Where a book can be condensed, someone's whole life. But observation, you can observe someone like,
it doesn't have to be your pain, but
it could be someone else's.
Probably, but you're watching someone else or someone's wise decision.
But as pastors, I know I've met so many people like, well, I just have to learn things the hard way. That's just how I am. I just, I've got to do it my own way. And I'm like, okay, if that's what you want to do, if you want to do it the hard way.
Yeah, it sounds actually noble in a way, but
Yeah.
if you think about it, it's actually a dumb way to live. I certainly want to learn.
Sure.
And I want to learn by my experiences, and I think that's how wisdom is acquired. I think wisdom is, I think we talked about it, we're going to talk about it in the message, but knowledge is important. There's a way things work, right? And it was, there's what do you call it, discussion about who said this, C.S. Lewis or Farmer or somebody, but they said when you go against the grain of life, you get splinters.
Yeah.
And so that grain, the idea of a grain is a design. There's a way that wood has grown, and that wood has a grain to it. It has a flow to it. And as a woodworker, if I go against that grain for whatever reason, it's just going to be difficult.
Pet a cat the right way and he purrs.
Yeah.
Pet him the wrong way and you're going to get scratched.
That's Jason.
Yeah. I'll tell you who said that. That was Jason Treadwell. Write that down,
Take
folks.
that to the bank.
Yeah. Pet a cat the right way.
Only a dumb dog licks a hot stove twice. But
we're going to write a book of Proverbs. Hang in there.
Yeah,
we got one for you.
It's coming. But you think about your own life. We do learn by experience, and hopefully we are quick learners, right? Because if I have an experience that was a wise choice, then I file that away and like, okay, that worked. Honesty is the best policy. Mom used to say, right? Honesty is the best policy. Well, that's just words until I actually put it into action.
So when you're
and I'm rewarded for honesty.
When you're a parent and you know, okay, this little guy's lying to me, and I know honesty is the best policy. I've read it, I've observed it, and I've lived it.
Yeah.
I've heard it before. I've watched other people that lied. I lied myself. I got caught. And you're trying to get that into them. Like, what is that? How does that feel? I know me personally, when I see my own girls when they were little and you're going through this and you're like, hey, you're lying to me. I know you're lying to me. Like, and they can think like, you can read my mind.
Yeah, how do you know
No,
that?
it's just that I've lied before too,
Right.
and I know
I'm
what
an
it looks like.
experienced traveler.
And you're just not good at lying yet because you're 5 or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's a great question, right? And so what do you do? On one hand, you're appealing to their intellect, right? You're like just saying, hey, here's why lying is a bad idea.
Yeah.
And so hopefully when our kids were younger, I would hopefully feed that truth, right? Like, here's an example. Here's a story of somebody else, and here's what their lying got them into. So in the Word of God, there's a bunch of great examples of people who didn't tell the truth and ended up paying for it later. In real life, there's multitudes of examples of people who didn't keep honesty, but and paid the price for it. I mean, just look in the world of politics.
Yeah.
And I remember as a kid, okay, here's an example. I remember 1972, I was in high school somewhere back in Chicago, and Richard Nixon was about to be impeached. And I remember as a high schooler who was a non-believer and who struggled with all kinds of issues in his life, but I remember thinking, wow, this is probably the highest profile job in our country. And this guy is having to go on national television and resign because he was dishonest. And I remember thinking to myself, and I didn't even actually have a mentor around me at the time, but I remember thinking, gosh, this is so painful to watch. I can't even imagine being in his shoes. I mean, you are shamed, you are busted, you are being removed. Of course, he resigned, but everybody knew that was falling on the sword kind of a thing. And so to me, that was such an object lesson. Like, gosh, I'd never want. Of course, it doesn't always work because sometimes we think what? Well, that's never going to happen to me. I'm special.
It reminds me like there are those teachable moments.
Yeah.
Like I don't know if in that moment when you were young and you were seeing that, your parents said, "Are you paying attention to this?" Because there's been times I've tried to teach my kids something and it wasn't a teachable moment.
Right.
They weren't focused on it. And it's okay. It's worth saying, but it kind of just becomes background. Like, oh, Dad's talking. He's saying something. But then there's those moments where you're like, okay, you're actually listening right now. You're feeling maybe the pain or there's something going on. And if I'll stop whatever else is busy and take this time to work with you, I think actually there's, it's like good ground. All of a sudden, there's good ground in frund of me.
Yeah.
Now is the time to
paying
plant
attention.
the seed. Now is the time to plant the seed.
Yeah.
And there's other times that like, okay, I know I'm saying shut the fridge or I'm saying, whatever. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. Please don't do that. And I have to say it because that's my job as a parent. I need to raise you to be a good kid. But I also know it's just going right by them.
Yeah.
But then there's other moments like, see, that's why Dad said, if you pay attention to this, the reason why you're hurting right now is because of this. And there's those moments.
There's some great stories. I have a couple great stories. Like when we were living in Latin America in a fairly good sized city in Mexico, and my oldest son was just learning how to drive. He was old enough to get a driver's license, and we only had one car. And back down there, the system's very different than it is up here. So I had to just go out and drive with him. Okay. You're going to watch me shift. Now you're going to get in the driver's seat. You're going to drive, and it was a little Nissan, and we were driving. But I was always, everybody drives crazy down there, so it's a very different environment. You have to pay attention. They drive
according to different rules.
Yeah, exactly.
It makes sense in there. What they're doing makes perfect sense. But when you go down there, cross culture, you're like, oh, they're
lines are relative and so forth. Stop signs are relative. So I was always like, watch out for this, watch out for that. Well, as he got old enough to drive on his own, get his license, I couldn't stop saying, hey, pay attention out there, be careful. And one time he was leaving the house and he said, I'm going to somebody's house, and he was taking the car. And I said, hey, Jacob, be careful out there. And he stopped, and I'll never forget, he said, Dad, you say that all the time. Do you think I'm not going to be careful? And I realized, and I said, oh, you know what? I'm sorry. I know you're going to pay attention. And I'm not worried about you. It's the other guy that I'm worried about. I trusted him. But at the same time, he was inexperienced. He meant well. He believed in the principle. Of course, he wasn't going to be reckless. He was going to
do the best job that he could do at whatever 16, however old he was.
Yeah, and it wasn't a month and a half later. I got a call. I was out of town, and I could tell as soon as I got the call from the tone of voice, something was wrong. And he said, "You're not going to believe this, Dad. A guy blew right through a stop sign and T-boned the car, wrecked the front end and so forth. And it wasn't his fault. Yeah, but." It was what I was.
Yeah, that's what you were talking about.
That's what I was talking about.
When I said be careful, I didn't think you were going to run a stop sign, but I knew someone else might. Would,
sooner or later. And so, and how do I know that? Well, because I had 25 years of driving experience under my belt, and he had maybe 6 weeks. And so,
how old were the boys when you guys came back?
Jake was just going into university, and Dave was just going into high school. So, whatever that would be, 19 and.
Do you think there were advantages to raising kids in another culture?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Tons of advantages, struggles too, but the advantage of being bicultural, bilingual, those things, even to this day in their adult lives and their adult occupations have served them super well. Yeah. So different perspective on
it. It is a very different culture, but it's also still a Western culture. It's in North America. Did coming home for them, was there like a culture shock of, I say coming home, with Mexico,
coming back to this country,
But did coming to the U.S., was that much of a shock to them that you had to, as a parent, kind of parent them through, or did they? Yeah. Was it relatively simple?
I don't think so. I don't think it's simple. I think it was difficult and it was challenging for them, but it was really challenging for me because you're blindsided in the respect that you're coming back to what you have called home, or where you were born in, so to speak. But our kids,
so you think it'll be easy?
Yeah, you think you know it. You think you understand it. But what you don't realize is, being gone 10 or 11 years, is that it's changed. Culture has changed. It's not the same. Some things are the same,
Right.
but a lot has changed, attitudes and so forth. And so have I. I've changed. So, being in another culture for a long period of time changes who you are. It kind of it punches the bag out a little bit. You're enlarged, and so when you're squeezed back into a context of another culture, you have to make some adjustments. But
I got a question for you here. It's relatively personal, so I don't know. You tell me if you want to talk about it on a podcast or not.
we can edit.
We could always cut this out.
Yeah.
Did you and Linda always agree on parenting? Like when you disagreed, because that's a silly question, because I don't think anybody always agrees on parenting. When you disagreed in parenting, and she wanted to go one way and you wanted to go another, say in discipline or training or just, handling temperament of a kid, like what did that look like?
Yeah.
How did you come together? Because Tricia and I realized we were married for 10 years before we had kids, and we'd gotten along pretty well, the two of us. Not that we never had conflict, but none of the stakes were that high. And even in our conflict, it was like, you're too quiet today, or I wanted to go here and you wanted to go there. But then when we had kids, the stakes felt so much higher.
I don't want to screw this up.
Yeah. Because you don't want them disciplined about this, and I think what they just did is terrible, and now suddenly the stakes are way higher, and it was our conflict over them was a lot more challenging than our conflict previous to having kids.
It's interesting how that dynamic is a lot like marriage, in the sense that whether we like it or not, we bring into a marriage whatever we've been shaped by.
Yeah.
And then, like it or not, we bring into parenting, in many ways, the way we have been parented.
Right. The good and the bad. So if your parents parented you by shaming you for doing wrong things, you might hate that, but it's like a reflex.
Right.
It's in there, and you're going to have to train it out if you don't want to use shame to shape your kids.
Yeah, deliberate understanding. I remember, and who gets a degree in parenting before they have kids? No one does. So you're thrown into this deep end of this pool. Now, in our world today, there's an enormous amount of resources, books, tapes, conferences, videos, all kinds of things you could watch.
Dobson felt like on the Christian side, sort of the real wave of that.
Yeah.
That all started
he was cutting edge
back then.
Yeah. Focus on the family.
But there wasn't a lot of other people doing it when he started.
Nope.
Now it's everywhere.
Yeah.
And whether you love or hate Dobson, like we needed the attention given to how do we parent godly children? How do we raise godly children?
I remember, it's funny you bring that up, because I remember we were brand new parents and we were relatively new Christians, so we didn't know a lot about Christian culture and who speaks on what. And we went to a James Dobson seminar, Focus on the Family seminar on parenting in Northern California back in the early 1980s. And I'll never forget. And of course, he's an educated guy. Yeah. He was a psychologist, doctor, and so forth. And thinking, I've never heard some of this. Like one of his classic things, one of his classic books was Love Must Be Tough.
Yes.
And the whole idea of discipline and boundaries and consistency. And I just remember, so back to background. So my wife was an only child raised by a single mom. Her dad died when she was young. My background was a really stable family, but a very quiet dad, non-communicative. He'd step in if the hammer needed to come down, and most of what he said was nonverbal. But so you throw that in.
Most of what he said was nonverbal.
Yeah,
I like that.
Yeah,
only a guy could do that. I'm saying something, but I'm not saying anything.
Yeah, he didn't need to say much.
But I'm saying something.
You're not going to talk to your mother like that, and that's my wife, right? So
Yeah.
And so in a way we felt like we were learning as we went with our kids. You know, do you let the baby cry even in the early stages? Do you let the baby cry? Do you pick it up every time? Do you
Yeah.
not have sugar for a year? I mean, do you? I mean, do you do timeouts as they become toddlers?
Yeah.
Do you do? I don't know.
Does ignoring behaviors, is that the right way to go? Like, well, just ignore this, and if they're not getting attention, it'll stop. I've heard that. Or no, actually, right now you need to give them attention for this behavior, but it needs to be negative attention. Well, what if I've just been giving my kid negative attention all day long because their behaviors have been wrong?
Yeah.
Like, where do I, like, is that the kind of parent I want to be? It's not easy.
Yeah.
And actually, that's maybe, I don't want to be a weakling, but maybe that's one of the reasons it's challenging for churches to even speak up about some of this stuff and to run classes like this, because there's such strong opinions about it.
Right.
And I have frankly seen...
And no two kids are alike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's no one size that fits
We'll
all.
talk about that for sure in the parenting class.
Yeah.
But also, no two sets of parents are alike. And I've seen incredibly godly people who have raised good kids and have very different methods than I have.
Yeah.
And they've raised good kids, and I've raised good kids, and my kids love Jesus, and their kids love Jesus, and we go about it two different ways.
Right.
And and they may feel very strongly about how, their bedtime schedule and what they do or don't do, and I feel strongly about mine. And so it is challenging. So how do you get past some of that and into, well, what is God saying?
Yeah.
And I think that's why it just has to be Spirit-led.
So many variables. I was thinking while you were talking about how this question about parenting plays into the first question about wisdom, because I remember as young believers with young children and young parents, which is what we were, I'd pick up a book, or I'd pick up this or pick up that, that was knowledge, and glean bits and pieces and tips and think, oh, that's so good. I never thought about that. I never realized that about child development or whatever. But then the other side of that coin was we had the privilege and the help of being part of a healthy community. Yeah. So around us were several dozen couples our age, and we all had kids in the same season of life. And so being in that community, we were able to glean. There was wisdom there in the community. There was a shared group of experiences and things that we learned from one another of what was good, what was probably not good, and the differences, and what was okay and what wasn't okay, and it really everybody's had that experience when you're talking to somebody and you realize, oh, I'm not crazy.
Yeah,
I must be the only one who made that mistake, and you realize, oh no. Yeah, we've all made those kinds of mistakes. Yeah. It's reassuring to think, But if you're alone, I just think that's the worst case scenario in a sense, because there's no one to draw off of. There's nothing to draw off of.
Yeah, we probably need some other parents. In this parenting class, we're going to have other parents on the panel, because both of us have maybe, I think, the unique experience of living in a community that was a deliberate community, Youth with a Mission. Both of us were in Youth with a Mission when our kids were young, in the formative age. And so you were both here, and I don't know exactly what it was like in Mexico, but you had, here too.
It was their formative years, yeah.
Yeah, and so you're not just like going out to get to a life group once every other week or something to be with people, but you're maybe eating one meal a day or 2 meals a day with a group of people, because we're all on this project together, we're working together. Yeah. And that has its own challenges and stuff. But my girls look back on that time, they're like, we are so glad that happened. Yeah. We're so glad. Like, we had so much fun, run around with other kids, like just seeing that and experiencing that, it was life to them, and they're very thankful for it.
And, it's interesting what you're saying is really a lot of how it's how a lot of the world works. Yeah, a lot of the world is community focused. It's the Western world that's with our garage door openers and our own houses and our own space and our own, and we don't interact as much as say a warm culture where everybody's eating together on a regular basis and everybody knows each other's business. And
a lot of my missions experience was in Asia, specifically China, and you could see it there in the architecture. The old buildings were communal buildings that were, in a square or a U shape with an open shared court.
Right. Yeah.
And the different generations all live there together. Yeah. Depending on your status, you might live in a different place.
Yeah.
But then communists came in, and communism took over, And now it's just all concrete, block. It's all like everyone's compartmentalized into their apartment.
And pigeonholes.
And it broke something that was incredibly valuable there.
Yeah.
Now in the villages, you'll still find, some of that architecture and some of that way of living. But I think we've done that in America in our own way. It wasn't through communism, but the American dream said you need to own your own property, you need to own your own land. Where people used to generations work together on a farm and spend time together, and grandparents would help raise kids because, well, now you're not running this anymore, but you've got extra time, and so the kids are going to be with you while I work. And I'm not trying to roll back time to some utopian because none of it was perfect.
Yeah.
But there is something good there that has been lost that we now have to work for. We have to make happen. It won't happen naturally anymore. Our culture will push us into segmented, little discrete individual units where you live separately. You don't live in community. I know communal living sounds scary. You start sounding like communism. But it was communism that destroyed that. It's not true community.
You know what this makes me think of is maybe something again you mentioned or we hear a lot is, well, what are the main things in parenting? What do I not want to? I don't want to miss this. If I only had 3 things, for example, in the class, we're gonna cover 5 subjects that we feel are these are the main things. And one of those things, I believe, is the transfer of values. In parenting, what I want to do is I want to transfer what I believe to be valuable. But that's a huge endeavor, right? Because that kind of implies that I need to figure out what's valuable. Because whatever it is, here's the deal. I'm going to transfer.
Yeah.
I'm going to impact. We joke all the time. You're going to parent. One way or another. You're going to parent poorly or you're going to parent wisely. So this idea of passing on value, like as a believer, as someone who came to know the Lord in his 20s, I see the incredible value of following Jesus, the presence of God in my life, and again, all the things that go with that, the living according to the Word of God and loving truth and so on. So my heart has been to pass on those important value. Now, whether they're going to be vegetarians or whether they're going to, eat meat or this or that, that's the peripheral, but the core is what we're after. But the communal thing is when we were living in a much more community situation, one of the things I would say to my peers who my kids were talking to all the time, because they related to adults a lot, was listen, play with my kids, goof off with my kids, but please don't contradict my values because that's not your place.
Yeah.
So affirm what I'm trying to affirm in them. Don't work against me. Don't sow discord.
Yeah. Oh, I remember distinctly in community like that an adult, not as old as my wife and I, but a young adult, had told my kids they were going to keep a secret with them. And it really upset me when I found out.
Yeah.
I'm like, you're telling my kid to not tell me something?
Right.
Like you couldn't do anything worse. Right. I mean, it's pretty bad, buddy.
Because that's the core. I mean, right? But that's a core thing.
Yeah,
right?
We had a serious conversation. You don't ever tell my kid to keep a secret from me, ever. Because like I say, that's a value. And our kids, our adult children right now are on their way out the door. They're not going to be living with us anymore. One's getting married. One's going off to do her own discipleship training school. And Trish and I have talked a lot about, okay, we're at the point where we see what we've given them. I can see like, okay, here's one. Faith the other day was talking about hard work. And she's a hard worker. Now, when she's little, I didn't know if she's going to be a hard worker or not. Because my other child, Grace, man, her room was just always clean. Her bed was always made. Her stuff but that was just her bent. I didn't have to tell her make her bed. She just did it.
Yeah.
Faith, you kind of had to like, hey, babe, I asked you, this is the second time I've asked you to do that. Now come on. But she's become this person who is a very hard worker. She's getting promoted at work because of her work ethic. And she said something the other day, like, she said, I know Treadwells are hard workers. I'm like, I don't remember if I ever said that or not, but you got it. And I appreciate that. Like, it's in you. But there's other things Trish and I were lamenting and laughing about that were like, you know what? We didn't get this inside of them. And it probably won't happen until they move out and they're on their own. Yeah. A few things, little things that don't matter as much. Yeah. Turning off lights. I know it's a joke that every dad gets frustrated at this, but the reality is I've told my kids a million times, turn off the lights when you leave the room. Don't leave the house with all the lights on. Yeah. Turn off the lights. Yeah. And at this point I realize, okay, they're not going to do it. It's not going to happen, but they'll move out, they'll get a place, they'll pay an electric bill, and I guarantee you they'll turn it off then. Right? There's just some things, and I don't want them to only remember
Life's coming
that
back
Dad
to
said
teach
turn
them.
out the lights. I'd rather them remember Dad had a value of a good work ethic.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, don't we do that though? It's like we get older in this particular example, and now I get the electric bill, and it's $60 more than I want to pay, and I realize, I need to start turning the lights off. And in that moment, you hear your father's voice.
Yeah.
I don't work for PG&E. I used to wonder, what does he mean by that? Well, once I started paying my own electric bills, I understood perfectly. Yeah. You know what this reminds me of too is this idea of parenting, the challenge of parenting in regards to nature and nurture. Those two sides of a coin of discovering how my kids are wired.
Yeah.
What is God, what's in there? Like our boys at a young age, their personalities were so different. And we used to marvel at, like, where did that come from?
Right.
And
they both came out of us.
Yeah.
It's all
relatively
our DNA,
similar,
and yet they came out. There's different spirits.
And so you work with that nature. You try to figure that out in the early stages of their lives. But then as they get older, you work with nurture, right? You want to shape. You want to gently confront bad behavior. You want to reward good behavior. You want to push them towards back to the values and things. So it's like this, almost like a tandem or a kayak, right? It's the oars. You have to oar on both sides. You go in circles. If you just stick with just nature, you get determinism and all kinds of other stuff. And
because you have a son who has an artistic bent.
Yeah.
And then that's your youngest. Jacob, would you?
Much more academic.
Okay,
much more of an academic bent,
Yeah, my girls.
They think differently.
I have one girl that was kind of artistic. I mean, theater, different bend than your son, but still, lived in that artistic world where everything, time was a little more relative and all that. Yeah. And if I treated both in the same way, like if I got on Grace the way I had to get on Faith to make her bed, Grace would have just got more and more uptight, more and more tense.
Withdrawn, whatever.
And where Grace, I had to calm down. It's okay. Like, hey, relax. This homework will get done. Why don't you stop doing homework tonight?
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know what parent complains that they have to tell their kid to stop doing homework, but that's the way it was with with Grace. Like, hey, relax. You've already got a good grade. Like, just settle down.
That is such attentive parenting right there, because I heard someone say parenting is figure out how God has wired my children and then cooperate with God in their discipleship. That's such a great definition. I want to get from God, which puts the responsibility on me to pray for my kids, to ask God for insight.
Yeah.
Lord, how did you wire them, and what is my job? Realizing I'm not alone. I'm actually, you and I are working together. I want to cooperate with what you've designed. And with kids, I mean, come on, there are no two kids alike. Even twins, we know twins who don't think alike. They may look alike, but they're.
Well, the truth is, I think we don't. When we dedicate our kids, they're now, we're stewards of our children's lives.
Right.
Right. We
For
steward it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And that comes to. I mean It doesn't end. As long as you're alive, you're your child's parent. But it changes over time.
It changes incredibly.
Yeah. And you shouldn't have the same relationship with them when they're 10 as when they're 20 as when they're 30 as when they're 40.
Yeah. Isn't that funny though that you say that, because you watch what I think is maybe not so good parenting, and you've got parents who are talking or dealing with their 9-year-olds like they're 20-year-olds. Well, let them make their own decisions. Let them do this. Let them don't stop this. Or the other side of that coin, or the other side of the spectrum, is you got helicopter parents who are still pouring the milk in Johnny's cereal, and he's 20 years old. Johnny, you want more milk? And like, wait a minute, I think he can make that decision.
Yeah, I've heard of dads that drove to their daughters' homes and pulled the garbage can down to the street.
Yeah. Parents filling out job references or university applications. Wait a minute, why is my dad doing this interview? I should be doing
back
this.
when I was in missions work, we would have applications for people to come and do missions, and their parents had filled out their 19, 20-year-old kid, and they'd filled out the full application for them, written down their testimony, for the kid. The kid didn't even do it, and then sent them to us to be parented. Like, I've done the best. Please, will you now raise them? And there's a huge difference. When we were there, and I was running these discipleship training schools where these young people would come, the gulf between a kid who had been parented well and had stable family, whatever that looked like, whatever the best that those parents could do, whether a single parent or a traditional mom and dad or whatever it looked like. The one who had a godly parenting and one who had been coddled, like I knew, like, oh, I'm literally going to have to teach you to make your bed. I've got a work detail for you to work in the kitchen, and I'm going to have to work beside you and show you how to wipe down a table, how to sweep a floor, how to mop a floor. You don't have the basic skills of adulthood. You've left the home, and you don't have the basic skills of adulthood. I'm going to have to walk you over to the laundromat, show you how to do a load of laundry, as opposed to, oh, you've got all that. Let's dig in to the Word of God. Let's dig into missions. Let's dig into, and then both of them are worthy endeavors, but it's very different starting points.
Here's a closing plug for our class.
Yeah.
You think about one of the complaints or one of the laments we hear over and over and over again. At Church on the Hill, we have a ton of educators. They work both in the public and the private sector, and they're wonderful. They're both valid. They're both amazing calls and amazing occupations. But the thing you hear over the last 10 years is, I got into this because I wanted to educate children, but I realize I'm having to parent other people's kids.
Right.
And you think about how that dominoes into so much dysfunction in a society, because then, of course, the government's going to get involved and say, well, we'll parent your children, and then there's all kinds of restrictions and rules and nonsense, right? Yeah. So this call to rise up and parent is just really, you think about the enormous impact of, we are literally getting the next generation ready to step in, because we're going to step off that stage. We're going to step out of places of influence, and hopefully the next generation is going to step in and be mature, be godly, be honest, be hardworking, and all those characteristics that we love.
Yeah, there's going to be some great people around the tables here, because I know at Church on the Hill we've got some families that have raised some amazing kids. Yeah. And in challenging circumstances, not that all of them, not every kid who's raised godly chooses godliness.
Right.
It's just true.
Yeah.
Not every, but we've got some amazing families whose kids I love interacting with. There's like it feels like a different species.
Yeah.
When a 14-year-old boy walks up and looks you in the eye and shakes your hand and asks you how your day was and how was the holidays, and then you talk to another 14-year-old kid who hasn't had any of that training, you're like, oh my goodness, you're going to shine like a diamond in this culture. Yeah. You're going to stand out so far above your peers.
Yeah. I used to tell my boys all the time, listen, show up on time, put in a hard day's work, tell the truth, and you'll never be without a job. And they never have. They've always had work. And because I think the world is that it's this vacuum when you walk righteously, and it's not a formula that makes everything beautiful, but I think it is this sense of I know who I am, and I know why I'm here, and I know what my purpose is. I don't know how all the details are going to work out, but
all right. Well, thanks for letting me pick your brain about parenting.
Yeah, we'll be back
on
this subject.
Yeah, we will. Yeah, we're going to do that parenting class, and then we're going to start our sermon series on Revelations this coming week.
And that class, by the way, starts January 31st, the last Wednesday in January, runs 6 weeks.
Yep.
And so you can find it, the sign up on our website, or you can register on our webpage.
And I believe if you register as soon as this podcast comes out, you'll still get
discount.
The discount, like only $25. If you have kids, another $10 for the child care. But we want to do child care for you so you can relax and enjoy the class. So. Yeah. All right. Bless you guys. We love you. We love our community.
Yep. 2024, here we come.
Yeah.
Ready or not.
Yep. See you on Sunday.